Okay, so today we are going to be making our peanut butter blossoms, which are a really great holiday cookie, and it's basically a peanut butter cookie that's been rolled in regular granulated sugar and topped with a Hershey Kiss. So let's go ahead and get started. For this recipe, we need room temperature egg and room temperature butter. So we are going to go ahead and cut up our butter so that it makes it easier to cream and easier to break down. Typically at Cookie Connection, we use all brown butter, so that's a different process. But for the sake of keeping this recipe in this ebook easy and accessible for everyone, we're just going to do regular salted butter, half a cup of granulated sugar, half a cup of brown sugar that's been packed well. We're going to go ahead and bring this down, lock it, and start creaming our butter and sugar. We're going to let it mix up a little bit and then turn it up a notch to 2 to really kind of break that butter down and get the chunks out of it. And we're going to stop it and we're going to scrape down the sides. Now, we're just going to use our spatula that we already used to get our peanut butter because it's all going to the same place. So we're going to get all the butter off of there so that we can really break it up and then scrape down the sides. And you always want to make sure you scrape down the sides so that you can get all of the ingredients that come along with your cookie. We're going to cream it again, this time on high, a little higher. You can use a stand mixer, you can use a hand mixer, or you can hand mix with a spatula or a wooden spoon, whatever you prefer. All those methods are great. Now, if you're hand mixing, it's going to get a little bit harder to, especially at this point, cream your butter, get your butter broken down. So if you're able to, I would recommend using some sort of hand mixer or stand mixer. Now we're going to put in our egg. A good rule of thumb is to go ahead and crack your egg in a different container, and that way if you get any shells, you can get those cleared out before you put it into your mix and then potentially ruin all of your mix. So we're also going to do 1 teaspoon of vanilla. At Cookie Connection, all of our cookies are made with a vanilla powder. It's a gourmet vanilla powder. It just gives a more robust vanilla flavor, makes it more gourmet. But for this ebook, we want it to be accessible for everyone and have ingredients that you already have in your pantry or you can run to the store and get really quickly. So we're just going to use regular imitation vanilla, 1 teaspoon of it in this recipe. And now we're going to cream all of that together. We're going to start it on low, get that egg breaking up really well. And we're going to turn it up a notch so it starts to really get in there and get broken down and then mixed back together. We're going to pause it and again scrape down the sides. It does add some time and some steps, but it's really worth it, especially if you're making cookies. That way you make sure you have consistent cookies every time and each cookie has all of the same ingredients. You don't want to have a cookie that has a big old chunk of butter or a big old chunk of sugar in it because that's never fun. It'll mess with the consistency of your cookie, the taste, and your cookie just won't come out how you're looking for. Turning it up a notch because I see a couple of little chunks of butter. No big deal. You can just speed it up a little bit to really get those chunks out and get them mixed in. Okay, now that we have that done, we are going to go ahead and do our dry mix. Not yet, actually. I forgot the peanut butter. That's essential. Okay, so next we're going to mix in the peanut butter. And this is 3/4 cup. Get all that peanut butter in there. That would probably be more like a sugar cookie if we forgot the peanut butter. But hey, it happens even to the most seasoned baker. And I tend to swirl a lot and get distracted. So this talking and putting it together thing is something I'm figuring out. But I'm glad I remembered the peanut butter. All right, we're going to lock it. We're going to start it on 1. Get that peanut butter going in there. We're going to turn it up a notch. And the peanut butter, as you can kind of see a little bit here, it's another great reason to scrape. It's not really mixing in with what we've got here. So that's why we want to stop it and scrape it down so that we make sure that it all gets mixed in. Do it one more time. Okay, now we are ready to do our dry ingredients. So we're going to take a separate bowl. A good rule of thumb is to always do your dry ingredients in a separate bowl when you're doing cookies, because once you dump those dry ingredients into the wet, it's going to start to clump, and that's going to cause different cookies to have different ingredients. Some of it might have a big old chunk of baking powder or baking soda, whatever you're using, flour. So it's always good to do that. We have got our 1.5 cups of flour, which I measured out. It's a good thing to measure out if you can, if you have a scale. They're about $10 on Amazon. And the reason it's good to scale out your flour is because it's very easy to mismeasure and take your scoop and you have a big old clump of flour that really weighs more than it should. And so that's gonna cause your cookies to be really dry and just not the right consistency or taste. So we've got our 1.5 cups of flour, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and we're gonna whisk it up really well before we put it into our wet mixture. Okay, now that we mixed it up, something I like to do just to be safe, instead of just dumping your flour into your wet where it could potentially go all over the place and then you lose some of your flour, which means your cookies won't come out how you're wanting them to. So what I like to do is take a smaller measuring cup and just grab some of the flour mixture and dump it into your wet. It takes a little bit more time, but it's a great way to make sure that you're being accurate and not losing any of your ingredients. Because once they spill out of your bowl, there's no way of knowing what you lost and how you can make up for it. Okay, so at this point we can go ahead and just kind of tap it. Okay, now we're ready to mix. You always want to do the lowest setting when you're mixing your dry ingredients with your wet so that it doesn't poof and go everywhere. So we're going to set it on 1. The other rule of thumb as to why you want to do this is because there's more leeway with your wet mixture if you overmix, but your dry, not so much. So if you overmix, your cookies are going to be very dry and thick and not in a good way. And they're just not going to come out right. Even if you used all the exact ingredients, if you overmix it, it has to do with the leavening agents in whatever you're using, baking powder, baking soda, as well as the flour. So it's not a good idea to overmix your dough. So we just scrape down the sides, and now we're going to mix it, making sure that our mixer is grabbing up everything from the bottom as well. You don't want to leave any flour or any sugar and butter mixture at the bottom because, oops, again, it's going to mess up your cookie texture as well as the taste. You'll end up with some cookies that are really thick and doughy, and then other cookies that just have way too much butter, and so they're going to spread a lot and be flat and just not be right. And these are thick cookies, so my mixer fell down. Got to be careful about that. But crisis averted. We're going to mix one more time, just for a second, looking to make sure everything's in there. Typically, when we're making our cookies at Cookie Connection, we wear a mask, and we're not talking. That way, when we lean over, we don't accidentally get any special ingredients into our cookies. But if you're just baking for fun, baking for the family, heck, I'm sure they've had worse go into the food. So we're going to scrape off our mixer. And now we are ready to make our dough balls and go on to the next step. Okay, so now we've got our gloves on, we've got our bowl of sugar, and I did about 3 tablespoons of sugar in here. I like to do a little bit extra just to be safe. That way you don't have to stop and get more as you're going. So we are going to just kind of free ball it here and make our own size balls for these peanut butter blossoms. At Cookie Connection, we have preset sizes that we do based on whether it's a mini deep dish cookie or a classic 5.5 ounce cookie. So we always weigh those out. But for this book and for your purposes at home, you can make the cookies however big or small that you'd like and just adjust the baking time accordingly. It's always good to start low with your baking time, and then if you see that you need more time, just add 1 minute at a time as you go.